What happens when Hollywood's most beloved rising star meets late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Florence Pugh sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. The tension that erupted last night left audiences stunned, social media in chaos, and one of entertainment's biggest names storming off, set in a dramatic exit that nobody saw coming. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. The stage was set for what appeared to be another typical Tuesday night on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Florence Pugh, radiant in a flowing emerald dress, had arrived to promote her latest project, but from the moment she stepped onto that familiar stage, something felt different. The usual warmth that characterized most celebrity interviews was noticeably absent, replaced by an underlying current of tension that even the studio audience seemed to pick up on. Kimmel, known for his sometimes abrasive interviewing style, greeted Pugh with his trademark grin, but those familiar with his work could detect something sharper beneath the surface. As Pugh settled into the guest chair, adjusting her dress and offering a polite smile to the audience, Kimmel shuffled his note cards with an almost predatory satisfaction. "So, Florence," Kimmel began, his voice carrying that deceptively casual tone that regular viewers know often precedes his more controversial moments, "you've been quite the advocate for various causes lately. Some might say you're getting a bit too political for an actress." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Pugh's smile faltered for just a moment before she composed herself. "I think artists have always had a responsibility to speak about issues they care about," Pugh responded diplomatically, but there was a slight edge to her voice that suggested she wasn't going to be pushed around. "Art and politics have never been separate, Jimmy. They've always been intertwined." Kimmel leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Right, but don't you think audiences come to entertainment to escape from all that heavy stuff? I mean, we're dealing with enough problems in the real world without having celebrities lecture us about what we should think." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the confrontational direction the interview was taking. Pugh's posture straightened, and those who know her work could see the same intensity she brings to her most challenging roles beginning to surface in real life. "I don't think I've ever lectured anyone," Pugh replied, her British accent becoming more pronounced, as it often does when she's feeling defensive. "I think I've shared my perspectives on issues that matter to me, just like any other person with a platform might do." "Are you suggesting that celebrities should stay silent about things they believe in?" Kimmel's laugh was sharp, almost mocking. "I'm suggesting that maybe some celebrities think their opinions matter more than they actually do. I mean, you're an actress, not a political scientist or a world leader. What makes you think people should listen to what you have to say about complex global issues?" The atmosphere in the studio had shifted dramatically. What began as uncomfortable tension was now approaching outright hostility. Pugh's jaw tightened, and she leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped together in her lap, with what appeared to be considerable restraint. "That's an interesting perspective coming from someone who makes political jokes and commentary every single night on this show," Pugh shot back, her voice remaining controlled but with steel underneath. "By your logic, shouldn't you also stay in your lane as a comedian and avoid discussing politics altogether?" The audience murmured at this direct challenge, and Kimmel's expression darkened. He wasn't used to guests turning his own arguments back on him so effectively, and it was clear he didn't appreciate being called out on his hypocrisy. "That's different," Kimmel replied, his voice taking on a more aggressive tone. "This is a comedy show. I'm making jokes, not trying to influence policy or tell people how to vote. There's a difference between entertainment and activism." "Is there?" Pugh countered, her diplomatic facade beginning to crack. "Because it seems to me like you're very comfortable sharing your political opinions when they align with what you think your audience wants to hear. But when someone else does it, especially a young woman, Suddenly, it's inappropriate. The tension in the room was now palpable. Kimmel's producers could be seen in the wings, clearly concerned about where this was heading. The usual light-hearted banter that characterized most celebrity interviews had devolved into something much more serious and confrontational. Kimmel's next words would prove to be the point of no return. "Look, Florence, I think you're a talented actress, but let's be honest here. You're young, you're idealistic, and you have a lot of opinions about things you probably don't fully understand yet. Maybe focus on perfecting your craft before you try to change the world." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, and the studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Pugh's eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment it looked like she might stand up and walk off the set right then and there. Instead, she took a deep breath, her training as a professional actor kicking in as she fought to maintain her composure. "That's incredibly patronizing, Jimmy," she said, her voice steady but filled with barely contained fury. "You're essentially saying that because I'm young and because I'm a woman, my opinions don't matter. That I should just shut up and look pretty while the adults handle the important conversations." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed energized by the conflict, perhaps thinking this kind of dramatic television would be good for ratings. What he failed to realize was that he was about to cross a line that would have serious consequences for both his show and his reputation. "You know what, Florence?" Kimmel continued, his voice dripping with false concern. "I think what's really happening here is that you're getting a little too comfortable using your platform to push agendas. Maybe it's time someone reminded you that people don't tune in to hear your political manifesto. They want to see you act, not preach." The words hit Pugh like a physical blow, and the mask of professional courtesy she'd been maintaining finally began to slip completely. Her hands, which had been clasped politely in her lap, now gripped the arms of her chair as she struggled to process the sheer audacity of what she'd just heard. "Push agendas?" she repeated, her voice rising for the first time since the interview began. "What agenda am I pushing by speaking out against inequality? By supporting women's rights? By caring about climate change? These aren't political agendas, Jimmy. These are basic human decency issues." Kimmel's smirk widened, sensing that he had her rattled. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't even discuss your work without turning it into some kind of social justice lecture. Do you think that's really what your fans want from you?" The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with some people shifting in their seats and others exchanging worried glances. This had gone far beyond the usual playful celebrity roasting that Kimmel was known for. This felt personal, vindictive, and deeply inappropriate. Pugh's breathing had become slightly labored as she fought to maintain control. "My fans follow me because they respect my work and my values. They don't follow me to be told to shut up and stay in my lane by middle-aged men who think they know better." "Middle-aged?" Kimmel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Wow, going straight for the age card now. That's rich coming from someone who's barely been in Hollywood long enough to understand how things actually work here." "How things work?" Pugh's voice was getting stronger now, fueled by righteous anger. "You mean how things work where women are expected to be grateful for any attention they get, even when it's condescending and dismissive? Where we're supposed to smile and nod while men explain to us why our opinions don't matter?" The tension in the room was now electric. Crew members could be seen whispering urgently to each other, and Kimmel's producers were making frantic gestures from the wings, clearly trying to signal him to change direction. But Kimmel seemed oblivious to the warnings, caught up in his own performance. "Look, I'm not trying to be dismissive," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm just saying that maybe you should focus on what you're actually good at instead of trying to be some kind of activist celebrity. Leave the serious stuff to people who actually understand these issues." Pugh's eyes blazed with fury, and when she spoke, her voice carried a controlled intensity that made everyone in the studio lean forward. "People who actually understand these issues? Like who, Jimmy? Like you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you understand very little about anything beyond making cheap jokes at other people's expense." The audience gasped at this direct attack, and Kimmel's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being challenged so directly, especially not by a guest on his own show. His usual arsenal of deflective humor seemed to abandon him as he struggled to regain control of the situation. "I think you're forgetting whose show you're on," he said, his voice taking on a threatening edge. "Maybe you should remember that I'm doing you a favor by having you here. This platform I'm giving you? Not every actor gets this opportunity." It was perhaps the worst thing he could have said. Pugh's entire demeanor changed in that moment, her spine straightening as she fixed him with a stare that could have cut glass. The young woman who had walked onto the stage trying to be diplomatic and professional was gone, replaced by someone who had clearly reached her breaking point. "A favor?" she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "You think you're doing me a favor? Jimmy, I came here as a courtesy, to promote my work and have a conversation. I didn't come here to be lectured about staying in my lane by someone who apparently thinks that having a late-night talk show makes him the arbiter of who gets to have opinions about the world." Kimmel realized he was losing control of the situation, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "All I'm saying is that maybe you should stick to what you know. Acting, entertainment. Leave the political commentary to people who actually have the experience and knowledge to make informed statements." The experience and knowledge? Pugh's laugh was sharp and bitter. "What experience do you have, Jimmy? What makes you more qualified than me to have opinions about the world? The fact that you're older? The fact that you're a man? The fact that you have a television show where you can talk down to your guests without consequence?" The studio had fallen into a tense silence, broken only by the sound of cameras still rolling and the barely audible whispers of increasingly panicked producers. What had started as an interview had become something much more dangerous, a public confrontation that was spiraling completely out of control. Kimmel's next words would prove to be the final straw, the moment that transformed an already heated argument into something that would define both of their careers in ways neither of them could have anticipated. "Listen, sweetheart," Kimmel said, the condescending term dripping with malice. "Maybe if you spent less time on Twitter ranting about causes and more time actually learning your craft, you'd understand that there's a difference between being a celebrity and being qualified to lecture people about how the world should work. You're here because you're pretty and you can memorize lines, not because anyone actually cares what you think about politics." The words hung in the air like poison, and for a moment the entire studio seemed frozen in shock. Even Kimmel seemed to realize he had gone too far, his expression flickering with uncertainty as the magnitude of what he had just said began to sink in. Pugh's face went through a series of emotions: shock, hurt, and then pure, unadulterated rage. When she spoke, her voice was controlled but vibrating with fury, each word carefully enunciated and delivered with devastating precision. "Did you just call me sweetheart and tell me I'm only here because I'm pretty?" Her voice carried across the silent studio like a blade. "Did you really just reduce my entire career, my education, my passion for my work, and my right to have opinions to the fact that I can memorize lines and look good doing it?" Kimmel tried to backtrack, suddenly aware that he had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. "Now hold on, that's not what I meant." "No?" Pugh cut him off, her voice rising with righteous anger. "That's exactly what you meant. You meant that I should be grateful to sit here and smile while you insult my intelligence, dismiss my convictions, and reduce me to nothing more than a pretty face who should keep her mouth shut about anything that actually matters." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. The movement was so sudden and decisive that it caught everyone off guard, including the camera operators who scrambled to adjust their shots. "You want to know what I think, Jimmy?" Pugh continued, now towering over him as he remained seated, looking smaller and more uncomfortable by the second. I think you're a bully who uses his platform to tear people down because it makes you feel powerful. I think you're threatened by women who refuse to play the game by your rules, who won't just sit there and laugh at your jokes and pretend to be charmed by your misogyny." The audience was completely silent now, some people covering their mouths. In shock, others pulling out their phones to record what was clearly going to be a viral moment. Kimmel's face had gone pale, and he seemed unable to form words as Pugh's verbal assault continued. "You want to talk about qualifications?" she said, her British accent now sharp as cut glass. "I have a degree in drama from Oxford. I've worked with some of the most respected directors in the world. I've researched every role I've ever taken, immersed myself in the stories and the people I portray. But more importantly, I'm a human being with a brain and a conscience, and that gives me every right to speak about issues I care about." She reached down and grabbed her purse from beside her chair, the movement swift and decisive. "What qualifies you to sit here and judge me? What gives you the right to tell me what I should and shouldn't care about? The fact that you have a TV show? Congratulations, Jimmy. You talk to celebrities for a living. That doesn't make you superior to anyone." Kimmel finally found his voice, but it came out weak and defensive. "Florence, please, let's just calm down." "And calm down?" Pugh's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You spend the entire interview trying to humiliate me. You call me sweetheart like I'm some child who doesn't know any better. You tell me I'm only successful because of my looks. And now, you want me to calm down?" She turned toward the audience, her eyes flashing with anger and hurt. "This is what women deal with every single day. We're told our opinions don't matter, that we should be grateful for whatever scraps of respect we're thrown, that we should smile and be quiet while men explain to us why we're wrong about our own experiences." The camera captured every word, every gesture, every moment of raw emotion as Pugh delivered what would become one of the most talked-about moments in late-night television history. Turning back to Kimmel, she delivered her final blow. "You know what, Jimmy? You're right about one thing. I am here because I'm successful. I'm here because I've worked incredibly hard to build a career based on talent, dedication, and yes, the courage to speak up for what I believe in. But I don't have to sit here and listen to you try to tear that down because it threatens your fragile ego." She slung her purse over her shoulder and looked directly into the main camera. "To anyone watching this who has ever been told to stay in their lane, who has ever been dismissed because of their age or their gender, or because someone decided their opinions don't matter, don't let anyone silence you. Your voice matters. Your convictions matter. And you never have to smile and take it when someone tries to make you feel small." With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the floor in the deathly silence. Kimmel sat frozen in his chair, his mouth slightly open, looking like a man who had just watched his career implode in real time. "Florence, wait," he called after her, but his voice was weak, desperate. "We can edit this, we can—" She stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time, her expression cold and resolute. "Edit this? So you can protect yourself from the consequences of your own behavior? I don't think so, Jimmy. Let people see exactly who you really are." And with that final devastating statement, Florence Pugh walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and what would become one of the most explosive moments in late-night television history. The cameras continued rolling as Kimmel sat in his chair, the reality of what had just happened beginning to sink in, while the studio remained eerily quiet, except for the sound of Pugh's footsteps disappearing into the distance. The interview, that was supposed to be routine promotion, had become a reckoning, and as the show finally cut to commercial break, everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come.